Welcome to the Mull to 3 podcast. My name is Suhan.
I'm John.
I'm Maz.
Today we're going to talk scissors, paper, rock and talk about how we like to play, why we play, and break that down into little archetypes and styles for you to share and listen to. Join us soon.
Mull to 3 is Australia's third best Magic the Gathering podcast with three hosts with three very different play styles, which is what we're talking about today. And we're going to start, as we always do, with our segment, Whispers of the News.
So last weekend was the big Pro Tour for Ixalan, standard format, and Suhan, I heard that you have been watching it relentlessly.
I have, because it was streaming and I had some extra time. The time zones make it difficult for us to watch in the evenings. So, Pro Tour, it was fantastic. The difference between this Pro Tour and the others was that there was a lot more time between the release on Magic Online and the actual Pro Tour. So all the pros had so much time. World Championships had already occurred, so people were already playing. So people were very familiar with the draft format as well as the standard at this stage. So you sound like you wanted to add to
I was
that?
about to say, usually the Pro Tour is only 3 weeks after the release or something, and it was like 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, about a month and a half. So there's a lot more understanding of the format. Interestingly, it also happened that many of the main decks had a lot of remnants from the previous standard format. And so on top of things with a very high loading was some kind of energy deck.
Can I just say, it's so crazy that Team Energy is still such a thing after
It's so
losing
big.
Aetherworks Marvel its combo piece.
So strong.
Like, even though it lost the combo piece, it's still a nuts deck. Like, that's really cool.
So despite the major, big haymaker being taken out of it, that combo being taken out, it's still very, very strong. And there were 4 color splashes. They moved into Bug or Sultai. And there were a lot of variants there, and that was the bulk of the play pool. Ramanat Red still maintained a presence. Interestingly, there was very strong showings right up to the final, the grand final matchup of decks that were not within those archetypes, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the one of note was Pascal Maynard, who ended up as the runner-up playing a blue-white Godpharaoh's Gift deck, but with no gateway to the afterlife. It was strictly refurbish, and then they just grind it out until they can land the Godpharaohs, and if they have no answer, with a quick instant speed destruction with the braid for the artifact, it just takes over. There's just nothing you can do.
I also think we had a first-time winner on a Pro Tour.
That's right. I think is that Seth Manfield's first Pro Tour win?
Yes, I think so. So I think he's been pro for quite a few years,
That's
but
right.
until 2015, he hadn't made a top 8. Maybe slightly 4 then, but then since then he's made 4 top 8s and he won this Pro Tour.
That's right. So he had a few, I remember, top 8s, but it took him a while to get there. I've also noted there was this, I'll just kind of quickly touch on, there was a Cinderella story. I can't remember his name, but he was a first-time Pro Tour player. He got all the way up to top 4, beat out that guy who's the number 1 guy on Team Channel Fireball, who had just been setting the pace the whole time and lost the entire Swiss round set, and took him out in the quarters and lost in the semis.
Rags to riches.
But he was also running Martyr vehicles, which was interesting. So the field was diverse.
I got a question. There was something to do with teams going into the Pro Tour. Was
That's
that
right.
a thing? Can you explain that?
So the team series was something they kept on touching on in the stream, and they have rankings for specific teams where, based on your pro points that you accrued at the Pro Tour, they rank your teams. I don't know what they win though, as a result. But I think Team Genesis, of whom Seth Manfield was a part, would have taken the team series at that stage. I'm sure there's a cash prize or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on to the next thing, John. You want to take over from some release information?
Yeah. So there's a new set coming out, or not a set so much, like a
Supplementary
15 cards or so, and it's from the Vault series. So it's basically a series of cards that they reprint as foils and.
They're kind of nice, and they also make it a bit easier to get your hands on certain cards that might have gone up in price.
They definitely bring the price down on certain cards. So this from the Vault is Transform cards. I think that's what it's called.
That's the theme, yeah.
And so there's
Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Keep
But some of the cards in the list are like Delver of Secrets, Alan Core. Delver of Secrets gets a new art, so does Garrett's Relentless. And the last one is Huntmaster of the Fells.
I get to see some a sideboard play, right? Yeah,
Yeah, see some on plate and jump and stuff.
that's right. Yeah.
Do you have any cards that you noticed from the list that you know?
In terms of likes, as much as Maz hates the Gatewatch, I quite like the flip cards in the Gatewatch. The art on it I really like. Liliana's art is particularly on point. And Jace Vryn's Prodigy still gets some fringe modern play as well, if I understand.
To be fair, those cards I quite like. If there's one thing that the Gatewatch I like, it's those transform cards. I think they're really creative.
But the 3 new are... I'm disappointed that there's only 3.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed in the whole set. I'm not a fan of these sets anyway, but I'm actually happy that the Gatewatch flip cards got reprinted. I think they needed a reprint.
Yeah.
Origins wasn't played enough, so there wasn't enough of
That's
them.
right, because it was a pretty poor draft set from what I understand.
Yeah,
I think it was some...
I think it was just very short, and it was like a
One set
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the whole set of cards is kind of to me, to be honest.
Maybe we should move on to something a bit more exciting.
Yeah.
There's for those of people who've been paying attention and listening to us, there's a new set coming up called Unstable. It's the third of the unsets, and just recently a whole heap of information was released about this. So something that we hadn't heard of before is sort of what's the world that this set is set in. Interestingly, it's steampunk, something that's very popular at the moment. However, you wouldn't have expected another steampunk set given that Kaladesh was around so recently, and that was steampunk. And the reason this happened is they planned this ages ago, before they even knew they were going to do Kaladesh, so they chose that. And there's a slight bend on the theme. It's sort of a steampunk world, instead of inventors, of mad scientists. So I think it's more of a sciencey type of theme.
But the unset is quite independent from the Jane.
Completely. Yeah, I guess, yeah, so it's fine. And everyone loves steampunk, so who cares? There's a couple of cards that have been spoiled. One that's quite important to talk about straight up is a card called Steamflogger Boss, who's a goblin. And he has... have a look at him. He's got some fairly unusual abilities involving riggers, and also another card or another type of ability called Contraptions, something that they've said is going to be quite throughout the set.
He's a reprint, isn't he?
He's a reprint because he was
from
in the
Future Sight.
Exactly. So it's kind of nice that they've worked him in. It's probably important as well. They've also to talk about the different tribes that they've said are going to live in this set, and there's 5, and they're all allied colours and quite unusual. So we got goblins in red and green. I don't know if we've seen green goblins before.
I don't think we have.
Yeah, this is a new thing. We have seen goblins in other colours, but not green. We've got cyborgs in blue and white. So we've got Azorius cyborgs. I'm probably going to be interested in them. Now we get to the really exciting ones. We've got spies in Demir colours, so black and blue.
That makes sense.
I think I said 5 before, it's actually only 4. And the last one, which is the coolest one, Suhan's going to be excited about this. Apparently the Rakdos team are supervillains.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool. So they're pretty cool names. It sounds pretty fun. I don't even know what that means. I'm going to ask Suhan to read out a new card that we also have, another review, which is called Sword of Dungeons and Dragons. Tell us about it, Suhan.
So Sword of Dungeons and Dragons is an artifact equipment that costs 3 generic to cast.
Like the other swords.
Yep, just like the other, the major famous swords. The equipped creature gets +2/+2, just like many of the other swords do, and protection from rogues and from clerics.
Which aren't any of the tribes I just mentioned, but I think they're very Dungeons and Dragons themed tribes. So that's probably why that's in there.
And so the second line of text is whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, which is also a line you see on many of the other swords, all the other swords, create a 4/4 gold dragon creature token with flying and roll a d20 die. If you roll a 20, repeat this process.
So that's the second ability, the die roll. And I should point out that the reason it's a gold dragon, that's not the colour, the magic colour, but in Dungeons and Dragons, there's all these different types of dragons, and gold is the most powerful. It's also a very good dragon. So there's lots of different types, and gold is really powerful. And that's why that's kind of fun.
And they equip cost 2.
Just like the other swords. So that's kind of fun. I think this is going to be really cool.
The art looks pretty sweet.
Yes, it does.
And the sword looks cool, and the art format is the same.
Gold dragon in the background.
Yep, look at this thing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Pretty damn cool.
It's really cool.
So that's something to get excited about.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Moving on to our main topic in the Mulligan. So, this week, let's take a look at what we've got. First topic, our episode name is Scissors, Paper, Rock, and the current grip is, why is it called Scissors, Paper, Rock, or rock paper versus rock paper scissors? How unusual.
We are the 3rd best Australian podcast, and in Australia we play scissors, paper, rock. We had an argument about this.
Everything is backwards. Everything in this country is upside down.
Go home.
Library positioning on your playmat. We had a discussion about this as well. I feel like we covered this topic.
I think we can mulligan this.
Top left kind of guy. I think, yeah.
I'm top right.
I'm top left too.
Top
Yeah,
right.
actually, I'm middle. I'm middle left. Actually, I put Exile on
You put it in the middle of your playmat.
middle of the place.
Weirdo. And play styles in Magic. How and why we play.
Mull.
What?
Just kidding. That's a good one. Let's keep that. Yeah, let's keep that. Let's keep that.
That wasn't a part of the plan.
That sounds sensible.
Okay, so first we're going to start with a topic called psychographics. Some people might have heard of these labels that Mark Rosewater, one of the head lead designers in Magic, Moreau, also affectionately called, talk about Timmy, Johnny, and Spike. Yeah, and so these are affectionate names. They have female equivalents as well, but I forget them.
Do they? Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
I think Johnny is Jenny, Timmy is something else.
Tammy, probably.
I think it's Tammy, and Spike, I don't know. I think Spike is just like...
Spike's universal.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So these psychographics have to do with why people play Magic and their motivations for playing and enjoying the game.
And it also affects their play styles.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and because inevitably the reasons will drive what they do as well. So I'll kind of go through them and we can talk a little bit about them. So Timmy is... The Timmy plays in order to experience a feeling or feel something as they go, which is kind of like an emotional or adrenaline rush that's described. So Timmys look for, big plays, for that one massive kind of card to swing down and play to have an impact. And that's the reason that drives their play.
I have to say, when I was a kid, I was definitely a massive Timmy. Like, I loved all green creatures. I loved like the 6-cost 6/4s, which back in the day were pretty cool. So I was definitely a Timmy back in the day.
I think part of the point is there when most people play, I think they tend to be Timmies when they begin because they get caught up in those big creatures and those kind of things that they can understand and seem really powerful.
Well, I'm not sure you did.
Maybe to start with a little bit. I played mucked around with zombies and a few little things, but I was there. We'll come back to it.
You want to make a splash
Yeah,
and do something.
I think
Those young fire worms, they were the business for me.
The current exceptions for newer players would be people who were playing other TCGs or other similar games.
Yeah.
And, so
and usually people evolve out of being a Timmy into something more refined, unlike
except the special people who are... the next one is a Johnny, and they play... the Johnny plays to express themselves. So that can manifest in the way that they build decks and deck building, in specific combinations of cards, or thinking about really stupid and weak ways to win.
He's having a go at me there. I personally think Johnny is the most fun way to play. It's about bending the rules, it's about finding unusual ways to do things and having fun, not just playing the typical big creatures.
Yes, and that's the way that your uniqueness can be expressed in how you manifest the play. And thirdly, a Spike, they play in order to prove themselves in some way. That's not necessarily always about winning, but it can also be that your deck, the one that you built, even if it's not very Johnny necessarily, is played by many people. So they get a lot of enjoyment out of that kind of style.
I like how he's pointing to me, but you guys had an experience at one F&M and where you met an actual Spike and you realised that I am not that spiky.
That was... I didn't meet him. I met him before. I brought him to FNM and realised how spiky
John's sort of a blunt Spike. He's been blunted off with the years.
Not as sharp.
What about... There's a couple other ones.
So, as I talk about, psychographics are about why people play. There are a couple other ones that people might have heard about. We talk about Vorthos a lot, and that has to do with kind of the lens through which you look at the game and playing. Vorthos is a lot to do with, talking about lore and the storyline, but it has to do really with
aesthetic almost.
The example that was written was Melvin is the other kind of spectrum on the archetype. And you're talking about whereas Vorthos looks at Magic play as kind of a piece of art, as the whole thing, the story, how things come together. Melvin's look at it like architecture, where they look at every pillar, the joints, and how these little pieces fit together.
The rules are a big thing.
They're very tight on the rules. Yeah. So we won't dig into that too much because there's a lot to talk about in terms of...
I've already lost.
But Timmy, Johnny, and Spike is what we talk about there. Yeah. And the word spike does get tossed around a lot in terms of, I spiked that F&M, which is a little bit hearkening to that word in the name, but not necessarily meaning the same thing. So
probably the next thing that we wanted to talk about were sort of some archetypes of decks and how people
That's
play.
right, because why you play affects what you play.
And,
so
we've sort of broken this down into primary and secondary archetypes. What we're calling the primary archetypes, it's sort of the rock, paper, scissors of Magic the Gathering.
Scissors, paper, rock.
Sorry, scissors, paper, rock. we'll explain why that's the case shortly. But the three big ones are Combo, and these are decks, sort of you could think of Storm in Modern and Legacy, and maybe even Aetherworks Marvel that used to be in Standard as a typical combo deck.
Or the Copycat.
Or Copycat, exactly, perfect.
Yeah, that's a great combination.
And they're decks that use a certain few 2 or 3 cards to create something that results in them winning. Usually some sort of infinite effect or some sort of just really dramatic thing that wins the game.
Extremely powerful.
Yeah. The next one's Control. A good example of this that used to be in Legacy would be Miracles.
Still is in Legacy.
That is, yeah,
unfortunately
not as
for me.
powerful. Yeah. But Control, the idea is that you play, you sort of try to go for a longer game, gradually accrue advantage in the form of cards or board state or whatever you do, and win in that long game by slowly getting ahead of your opponent bit by bit.
You have the better late game, basically.
Exactly. And you try to push the game to late game. And the final one, which is kind of the complete opposite of that, is Aggro. A good example of this is Ramanap Red in Standard at the moment. Perfect example. This is a deck that's explosive. It tries to win straight away, and if it gets into the late game, it starts to get in a bit of trouble because it doesn't have those card advantage engines typically. Yeah. Did you want to add anything on those topics at all, John?
So we're using scissors, paper, rock as an analogy, but it's just an analogy. Like in certain formats, aggro is better against control than is combo. So for Legacy example, aggro is basically unplayable against combo because combo is just faster than it. But in modern, it's sort of the other way around. But we're just generalizing here. So.
It's a good example. What about the secondary archetypes?
So there's some secondary archetypes. One is Tempo. So this is like a Delver deck, or in modern Death Shadow, where it plays cheap threats and then uses cheap spells to back it up and keep it on the board. So it's like they create a tempo and then try to play the game to that tempo. That's what it's called.
And another word for that is the clock. People often refer to creating a clock, and it's about getting a creature that will
more
do
about
damage.
having something that imposes pressure at some point early, protecting it, covering for it, countering things that kind of destroy it, that kind of thing.
Another one is Prison. So a big deck at the moment in Vintage, it's probably the best deck in Vintage, is Shops, or Mishra's Workshop, and it plays a bunch of prison effects like Sphere Resistance, Fallen of Amethyst before it got restricted, all the other cards in the deck because it got restricted. So that it stops your opponent playing Magic basically. So they're just unable to play Magic.
Usually not a lot of fun to play against.
Yeah, unlike Control where you counter their stuff and they're allowed to play it, but they don't get you counter it.
You wrath it or whatever.
Yeah, Prison decks, they can't do it. They just sit there and go, your turn.
Another example of that would be Land Destruction in my deck. Like No Lands Man does play like that a little bit as well.
And the last secondary archetype we have which is a lot more of a primary archetype these days, is mid-range. So I don't like to talk about standard mid-range because that's
kind of the mainstay, and we were talking about earlier in the pre-episode about how creatures have become more and more powerful. There's this creep as a result, and you have creatures being a kind of a mainstay within the format. So the kind of classic example of that actually in Modern would be Jund, where you have high-value, low-costed creatures where it's not just about creatures and beating down, but you have a fair few control cards that, destruction spells, Lilianas, etc.
Mid-range is almost synonymous for the term good stuff, which a lot of people play a good stuff deck where they just put in really powerful cards, and they have to be across the whole mana range because they have to play stuff early, mid, and sometimes late as well, and that's where it sort of comes from.
For me, the most mid-range creature is Siege Rhino. It's just like it's play it, and it's just good.
That's like many other cards. That's a great example.
So I guess moving on, transitioning from that, we can talk a little bit briefly about our play styles within each of these categories. So I'll start. We've already alluded to a little bit of this, I suppose, but I'm the classic Timmy. There's just no doubt. But there's just like with many things, there's a bit of crossing over and crossover. I tend to be a Timmy that has a propensity to spike. So when I get into competitive games, I just kind of put my hat on. And because I don't think so heavily about it, and I have assumed this like newbie Timmy hat, I tend not to make emotional decisions at that stage. I don't think too much and get anxious. I just play. It helps you win.
I'm not going to argue. It definitely works. You win more than
So what about your psychographics?
For me, I'm a Johnny. I like to do unusual things. I like to mill. I like to destroy lands. I'm a Johnny.
These two like to describe me as a spike, but I'm much more of a Timmy than they realise. I like playing my favourite cards and all favourite tribes.
That's
true.
So
all favourite types of cards, which is creature cards.
Keep going with that and talk about your archetype of decks that you like.
So generally I like playing creatures. I wouldn't say I like playing aggro, but little creatures generally are aggro, but the deck I play at the moment is like a mix between an aggro and a combo deck, which is Legacy Elves. Also play D&T, which is like aggro and a prison deck in the same deck. So I like playing creatures basically.
I like to play unusual decks. My current decks tend to be in modern a bit sort of aggro, a bit sort of combo in my mill deck, and in Legacy it's basically a prison deck. It's my no lands man. So I
Close to a
like
full-on prison deck.
Unusual stuff. I like unusual things like that.
My decks that I actually play don't really represent my enjoyed play styles because I play Eldrazi Stumpy, which is a combination of prison and aggro, and elsewhere I play a few other different things. But I've increasingly found that I enjoy mid-range kind of tempo-ish decks.
Cool.
So John pulls me and I want to put threats out early, just like I enjoy doing, and I was like, nope, mine, go, and then beat down to win. So I'm finding that John would be kind of next on the roster. So that's kind of where we sit at the moment with that kind of thing. But I think it's time for our next segment, which... glitched for a minute.
What is the deal with getting mana screwed?
Oh my god, I know it's going to seem really hypocritical from the guy that plays a land destruction deck to complain about being mana screwed, but this is my number one greatest problem with Magic the Gathering as a game, and I'll explain. So, if anyone's ever played, I think I've spoken about this too many times, Hearthstone, a game on the internet, which I played for a little while, then I stopped because Magic was better. Hearthstone has this great system where you get mana every turn, and it's reliable, dependable, and no one ever gets mana screwed. Everyone always gets to have a game. Some people have better cards, some people have worse hands, but everyone always has mana and gets to play. In Magic, you might only draw one land for an entire game. You might draw no lands, you might draw two. You get to mulligan, but you still might not get many lands.
You might refuse to mull to 3 like I did on the weekend, mull to 4, play out 5 turns and never see a mana producing land.
It is not fun to beat someone who has to mulligan out. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
To be honest,
It's not as enjoyable.
my opponent also clearly was not having fun. Like
This is my biggest problem, and I think this is the biggest flaw in the game. I don't know how to fix it. You'd have to have like a separate deck for lands or free mulligans if you feel you have no lands or something. I don't know how to fix it, but this is my biggest issue.
I don't think it's like needs a fix. It's just an unfortunate side effect of a great game that sometimes
Happens.
there is a bit of luck and chance, and sometimes by chance it's just not a good game.
That's a very rational answer, John. You've put me back in my box.
Well, Hearthstone sucks, so whatever.
Anyway.
And that's our episode for this week. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, review, or otherwise engage with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Malta3. You can also find us on iTunes and on Spreaker. And
you can also find us next Thursday.
Yes.
At Next Level Games at Mooney Ponds.
Yeah. Yep. Not this week, the week after.
See you next time.
Bye.
I made a drink.
Yeah.